countdown clock is ticking. Big changes are ahead for NYCHA, but will they bring improvements for long-suffering residents?
I've learned, Lisa, like yourself, that it's a humanitarian crisis in the worst way.
I sat down with HUD Regional Administrator Lynn Patton for her take on recent developments. Patton is known for talking directly to residents and seeing conditions firsthand. The disturbing images that scream neglect, no heat, lead and mold, and rats running wild are all too familiar to her and fuel her determination to make positive changes.
It's emotional, it's unfair, and it's got to end.
Patton's boss, HUD Secretary Ben Carson, toured the Queensbridge houses in advance of a meeting with Mayor de Blasio and a congressional delegation. The mayor needs HUD on his side to convince federal judge William Pauley NYCHA can climb out of a multi-billion-dollar budget hole and give residents what they deserve. The mayor sounded hopeful after the meeting.
There's going to be a detailed negotiation process. We talked about how that process should proceed. We affirmed the timeline. We affirmed who the players would be. This was very tangible stuff to keep us moving forward.
Robust oversight, specific remediation milestones. And if they can't produce that on or before January 31st, the Secretary will be declaring NYCHA in substantial default.
City Council member Alika Ampry-Samuel is chair of the City Council Housing Committee. She also grew up in NYCHA housing and favors a different path.
I do think that there should be a federal monitor in place and new management, a new management structure from the top down at NYCHA.
If Secretary Carson declares NYCHA in default, it triggers a housing law from 1937 that allows him to put the city agency in federal receivership, hire and fire, and even choose who runs it. It would be a political embarrassment for the mayor and something he's trying to avoid.
This is the United States of America. People should have running water. This is not, they're not asking for luxurious conditions.
Patton says the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District is still conducting criminal investigations into NYCHA employees and management. There have been arrests for embezzling tenant rents and falsifying repair records, and more are expected.
We trust that the SCNY, who has been obviously investigating NYCHA for about 3 years now, will follow the evidence where it leads, and we all know that they have done several raids in that regard and that they just indicted 3 high-level managers from NYCHA.
So what is at stake? Let's find out what our panel has to say. But before we do, one quick note. We did invite NYCHA to send a representative, but they were unable to do so. Joining me is Heidi Morales. She's a working mother of 4 children. She's also a NYCHA resident. Heidi, great to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Thank you. And also with us is Danny Barber. He's the president of CCOP. That's the Citywide Council of Presidents. They represent the resident and tenant associations, all of their presidents of all the NYCHA developments. Danny, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it. Also with us is Alika Ampry-Samuel. She's a New York City Council member from Brooklyn. She is the chair of the City Council Housing Committee. She grew up in Brownsville, and Brownsville is one of the districts, one of the neighborhoods that she represents. City Council member, thank you so much for being with us.
Glad to be here.
We really appreciate it. Let me start with you, because you are in those hearings, you're down there at City Hall, you're in the community, you see these discussions that are taking place. We hear about NYCHA 2.0, we hear about rapid repairs. What is really going on in terms of the overall picture here?
Well, yeah, you know, I grew up in Brownsville, but I also grew up in NYCHA. And so I think it's critical to be able to have the voice of the people and have somebody that has the ear of the street, know what's happening. And the mayor did release the NYCHA 2.0, and we know that there's been increased funding from the city, there's been increased funding from the state, as well as HUD. But the residents don't feel that. Residents are still without heat and hot water. Residents are still suffering every single day. And so we need to look at what's happening on a federal level. And I hate the fact that we have to wait 6 more weeks to find out an actual decision from Judge Pauley with the federal lawsuit. But at the same time, we got to get through these next 6 weeks, the same way we had to get through the last 12 months and 2 years and 10 years. And so there's a lot happening on every single government level. And I'm glad to just be in the city council to help push, fight, and make sure the voice of the people is at the table.
No, and we appreciate you had the Brownsville Town Hall this past summer, you know, one of the many town halls. You've been to our Street Soldiers town halls. and you're out there on the streets. And we appreciate you being here to help us kind of navigate our way through all this terminology and these programs that are coming out. Danny Barber, one of your complaints throughout the whole process of the last couple years has been that residents' voices just aren't being heard. We hear lots of press releases, see press releases, hear media announcements, all of these kinds of things. Are things much different for residents today than they were a year ago? The majority.
Basically, things are pretty much the same, although we may have little things that are done different under the tutelage of Vito Massachulo, the general manager, who has come in and who has really given effort. My mom always said, give credit where credit is due. So I will say that Vito has attempted, he has been attempting, he has been adherent to the calls from the electeds as well as from resident leaders that reach out. So I will say that there has been some change with the general manager, but for the rest of the system is basically the same. So it's like the message that the general manager gives out on how things should be is not adhered throughout NYCHA.
And not yet, maybe. Let's keep hope alive here. But the Heidi Morales, you have 4 children. Your youngest baby is 5 months old. And tell us about the first NYCHA apartment that you moved out of.
When I walked, first thing when I walked into the apartment, you already smelled mold. You smelled wet wood. And from then on, I was just like, okay, maybe it's just piping needs to be fixed. Throughout the process of me fixing the apartment, we found a lot of pipes, rusty pipes, and little cracks and crevices where they wouldn't fix things, and you can see the black mold behind it. About 3 months after I moved there, my daughter caught her first asthma attack. My daughter's done passed out in front of the ambulance and everything.
And how old was she?
She was about 3 or 4 at the time.
Oh my gosh! So she never had asthma before you had moved into the apartment.
No, not at all. And then putting tickets in, tickets being closed, no one coming, or them coming when they feel like it and not notifying you that they're on their way. It's just I'm like I said before, I mentioned to them, I'm just another needle in a big haystack. There's so many people that all the stuff that I see on the news, I'm going through every single thing. And they took me out of one apartment because it was uninhabitable to move me to another apartment 2 buildings down, and now I have every single thing that I was dealing with before, but now I have rats because I'm on the first floor. You could smell sewage, like a smell of sewage coming up from the basement, inside the bathrooms, inside the closets. When you walk, it's embarrassing to have people come over because you know that they're gonna go, what's that smell? And they're gonna think it's you. You have a dirty home or something. Right. I don't like having company. My mom comes in and she smells it. It stinks in here.
But what does it do in terms of the kids? And how is your daughter doing now?
My daughter, she has to take steroids twice a day, morning and PM. She takes 3 allergy medications, and she takes if she has a machine, as well as
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
At age 3 or 4?
Yes, since age 3 or 4, she's been on that, and she's permanently on those medications. If my daughter, the more she gets asthma attacks, scar tissue starts to build in her lungs. And the doctor told me, lung specialist, told me that if my daughter keeps suffering, more exacerbation she get, more exacerbation, more lung tissue, more scar tissue, and that means, chronic problems when she gets older.
And did the doctor tell you, the lung specialist say that it came from the mold, or that it was
from all that? It comes from allergies. Now, when I moved there, I already knew there was mice. I didn't think there were rats. My neighbors told me there's rats. I'm like, okay, But I had a cat. Come to find out, my daughter's highly allergic to cats. But if I don't have a cat, I have mice. So either way, it's like you can't get around.
You can't win. You can't win.
Mice are smart creatures. They're not.
Right.
You patch up one hole, they're going to find their way
and we've
around.
seen firsthand the rats for sure. Talk with us about some of these new plans. We heard this NYCHA 2.0. What exactly is that, City Council member?
So the plan is to be able to generate revenue into the NYCHA development. So with a $32 billion capital repair need, 2.0, which looks at converting the regular public housing developments to Section 8 to be able to provide the necessary repairs now. And then there's also a concept of being able to develop and build new construction on underutilized, or what they term as underutilized NYCHA land. And then there's a part of it that also looks at the possibility of selling off air rights. So when you look at the plan 2.0, it's just kind of all over the place to be able to cast a wide net and be able to drive or bring in as much revenue as you possibly can to address the needs that we hear every single day.
All these, like we just heard from Heidi and what her family's going through. Let's just take a short break. I want to come back to the money, because that's something a lot of people don't understand, how they could have gotten so much money every year and yet things just not getting, simple things just not getting fixed. This is Street Soldiers. I'm your host, Lisa Evers. We'll be right back.
But at the end of the day, she has 4 babies at home that are running around in the household with rats.
When you hear Heidi's story about what she goes through with her children, what do you think about that?
You know, we have conversations on such a high level sometimes when we get into these roundtable discussions with the mayor, or if I'm having a meeting with Lynn Patton from HUD, or having a meeting with the governor's people, we're always talking about money, right? And the conversation is always, well, we're giving more money than anybody else over the past several decades, so we're doing our part. But what's missing is the stories, right, from the families. And when I hear Ms. Morales' story, it makes me sad. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to figure out, what are we saying, what are we doing? But at the end of the day, she has 4 babies at home that are running around in the household with rats.
Right.
And where's the accountability?
Danny, in terms of the money, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the city budget is $2 billion a year for NYCHA. Mm-hmm. A third of that $2 billion comes from residents paying their own rent. So where does $2 billion a year go?
NYCHA gets their share from the city, but we have to always look back. There was a time where there was 21 city and state developments that the city nor the state took care of. And HUD monies were utilized to take care of those 21 developments. And HUD started cutting the funding that it was giving NYCHA. And this is back in 2004, 2006. And so that created the hole that we're in now. That was the beginning of the hole. And it continued and it got worse. And then the city started giving money under Christine Quinn, with the internship program, where she put in the $10 million, and then the city started giving, the state started giving, and then the finger pointing started. And like Councilwoman said, that we give more money than this one or anybody else is giving.
But meantime, it's sitting there in the bank somewhere.
You did Patterson houses a few weeks ago.
Right.
You had Patterson houses
no
where
water.
Patterson were
no,
paid.
not even forget hot water, not even any water.
No water, and they were slated, and the boilers were paid for, and they have yet to get their new boilers. They still
the temporary
have
boilers.
The temporary boilers.
They've been there for more than 5 years.
5+ years that conk out.
Let's talk about a year from now, or even just a month or two from now, after the federal judge, Judge Pauly, who's been involved with this case, decides, does HUD have to come in, or does the federal receivership take place? What exactly is this federal receivership we keep hearing about?
So if there is a administrative receivership, that would mean that HUD would step in, and HUD would have all management responsibilities. They would come in, they would do a lot of firing, is what we'll see. And not just the staffers at NYCHA, but also we got to think about all of the union members who work at NYCHA. And so HUD would step in, and they would just dictate anything and everything that's supposed to happen. But when you said what's going to happen next month or a year from now, I think the best sense of like a new beginning would be a monitor being put in place, and they would oversee all of the funding and dollars that go through from the city, the state, and federal government. And because they've already been put on blast from, like, you know, people like you, Lisa, right? There's no turning back.
Right.
So the spotlight is on NYCHA.
Hide, you can't deny. They denied there was no heat problem for a while till they couldn't deny it anymore. And all these other issues, we have the video and residents have pictures.
So the money is there.
Yeah.
It's just about putting a management in place to make sure that the money is allocated and spent the way it should on behalf of the residents. So there's no turning back.
Danny, what do you think about in terms of these options that are open? Whether, you know, NYCHA remains under the city jurisdiction and the city runs NYCHA, or the federal judge says, hey, you know, you have a federal monitor coming in. What do you think?
Well, we see from Chicago that receivership isn't a good thing, because under receivership is possibility of demolition and not a one-for-one replacement. So that brings up the homeless rate drastically, and it puts people who are already home and housed to make them homeless and houseless. That's not a good thing. I agree with the council member. It just has to be resident oversight as well. It needs to be concrete, solid resident participation at its greatest. You residents cannot be a suggestion as the old consent decree sought us to be.
But you were there talking directly to the federal judge.
Exactly, and I expressed to the judge that we live it. We go through it on a daily basis. And if who's best to call an expert but someone who goes through it daily, constantly, frequently, and we're only considered to be a suggestion. It's a great idea. Things can work. It can be good for the residents, but it has to be more than just a Band-Aid. It has to be transparency and accountability. And like the council member said, I know that they wouldn't do anything less than coming in and like cleaning house. The old saying, the fish
It sounds
rot.
like you need to clean it. You got rats and everything else you need to clean up. Heidi, in terms of your future, I mean, this is a nightmare for you every single day. How do you get through that?
I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to figure out how I can just work. I wake up every day pursuing my career and just like everybody else and trying to move up and buy myself a house. You know, and with the whole thing with, you know, them coming to fix the apartments, like the construction, I mean, you know, breaking things. What about the people that, like, for example, you break a wall down and it's infested with rats, all that's going to go into the air. People are in their homes breathing that in already. You don't want to break down things when they're there. You have to move people out to get things done. You can't have them there while you're doing all this. When repairs are being done in my house, I have to send my daughter to my mom's because she can't breathe in all that sawdust or the sheetrock being sanded or the mold being pulled out of the walls. She can't. Well, none of us could breathe any of that.
And you say you're looking for another place to live, but
it's hard. It's like,
it's very the rent.
Hard.
I mean, the gentrification situation is very hard to find any kind of affordable apartments, isn't it?
It is. But I mean, what else? What can I do? That's why I'm here. Hopefully, God willing, you know, with every prayer, I wake up every day and all this comes to something.
Thank you so much for being with us. We wish you a very, you know, happy holiday season, as happy as it can be in those circumstances. And I'm sure knowing what kind of mother you are, you're going to make it as great for the kids as possible. So thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Danny Barber, thank you for keeping up the fight and, you know, always being available to us to break things down and show us what's going on.
Give me a call.
We do. you know you already get to go. City Council Member Alika Ampry Samuel, and thank you so much thank you for putting so much effort into this and also coming up with all these reports and all of the data that is you know, that a lot of us don't understand, but that you really need to convince them in a government situation that this is the real reality that's going on. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Lisa.
And I want to thank all of you for being on this episode of Street Soldiers, and thank you for joining us. Wishing you a very happy holiday season. Remember, use your mind. It's your best weapon. I hope it's your only weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace.